What's up, everyone? Tara Roberts here, and welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy show with me, your host, Tara Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, November 19th, and we are live. We are live. I'm taking your questions live. We're going over rankings. I'm sure we're going to talk about 10,000 injuries, rest of season questions, all that good stuff. So drop them in the chat. As always, again, if you enjoy my content, be sure to like this live. If you're watching live, be sure to like the video, or if you're watching not live, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and also subscribe to the Dear Miss Fantasy podcast, available on all podcast platforms. We're going to go ahead and jump in here because we got some questions right off the bat because you guys got in here early, dropping them off early here. I'm going to start off with super chat here from Polanski. 12 team PPR have JSN, Lamb, Jefferson, JMO, Pierce, Franklin. It's a solid group of wide receivers there for sure. You're 5 and 6. And you need running backs. You have Hampton, BNSN. I don't know. You have Hampton on. Oh, Benson. You have Benson on IR, Hampton on IR. Well, Benson is coming back. We don't know for sure if he's going to be back this week. So you got in here super early with that question. So I'm thinking it was probably dropped right before we got the news that he was going to be opening up his practice window here. So hopefully we'll get him back. I wonder if they did that because, obviously we have Amari DiMercado that is dealing with an injury there. So possibly they're scared to be a little too shorthanded and just said, okay, it's time for us to go ahead and bring Benson back there. But you have Benson, Hampton on IR. You're starting Sean Tucker, Bashal Tootin, and you got RJ Harvey on a bye. And we also got the underwhelming performance from RJ Harvey that we have not gotten to chat about because we have not been live since our RJ Harvey lead back debut, which was lead back-ish. No shout out to Sean Payton this week. We rarely give him a shout out for his choices, but especially not this week after he gave us the old Sean Payton with giving us Jaleel McLaughlin getting the goal line touchdown there and a decent amount of carries there. So it was Harvey was the RB1, but it really was still more of a committee. And unfortunately, the receiving work that he got wasn't really ample there. So it was kind of disappointing there. And your quarterbacks there are Purdy, Dart, Herbert, trade for an RB, Travion question mark. Yeah, I mean, you've got ample amount of firepower from a wide receiver perspective to trade multiple assets there. I don't know. It's Jefferson is a little bit of a hard sell right now. He's a super buy low just because the value is actually down significantly there. You could try to sell him and see what you would get, but probably not going to get a locked in RB1 there. And you need that, right? Because we've got Hampton, on IR, and we don't know exactly what point he'll be back. They're on the bye week here. We still don't have any kind of confirmation on him. We feel good about Trey Benson coming back, but then you're also at risk of losing Sean Tucker as a starter if we get Bucky Irving back here next week or this week potentially there. And then we've got Bashal Tootin dealing with injury. So you do need to make a move for sure right now. I might just go ahead and, as much as it might be painful for you, I might just go ahead and sell CD because he's performing at a high level. We do know that he has competition from George Pickens there. You're not going to get the bang for your buck that you're going to want out of Jefferson. Perhaps now might be an interesting time to try and sell high on Jameson Williams, especially with Sam Laporta out. You can see what you could get out of that. But at least Lamb will get you a locked-in RB1 there. So that's my lean, trying to sell Lamb and grabbing yourself a true RB1 there would be the best bet for you. Because, you're good on a week-to-week basis with JSN as your wide receiver 1. JMO, quite frankly, is your wide receiver 2. I do have him. We'll check out rankings in a little bit here. I do have Jameson ranked higher than Jefferson this week, which is a little bit opposite of consensus right now. I have, before I bring up the graphic here in a little bit, I have Jameson at wide receiver 13 and Jefferson at wide receiver 14. Um, consensus has consensus has Jameson at wide receiver 16 and Jefferson at wide receiver 9. That feels a little aggressive to me, considering the level of underperformances that we've had from him. And I haven't gotten to talk to you guys about the matchup for Jefferson this week. We can talk about that right now. And, maybe this is also a good time to sell Jefferson before perhaps another wildly underwhelming performance. I have concerns about him this week in the matchup against Green Bay. That's why I've dropped him this week. It's less about, JJ McCarthy is obviously not the ideal situation apparently for him, but it's less about the JJ McCarthy situation and more about, because, hey, maybe his alter ego finally pulls through. Maybe. But it's more about the problem of the matchup here with Green Bay. As your resident Packers fan, Green Bay traditionally, and obviously, we've had this, defensive coordinator here for multiple years, but traditionally, multiple years back here, Green Bay has taken the approach, and personnel on the field has changed as well, but they've taken the approach of when it comes to Justin Jefferson, they specifically want to shut him down. So you often get these incredibly underwhelming performances from Justin Jefferson because their goal is to focus exclusively on him and make sure that Jefferson himself can't beat you. And they've been very effective at it. And I'm sure it's in his head. He knows that this is a matchup that is often a struggle point for him in the past. And they're probably going to take the same approach because it's been successful for them. So I do have my concerns about Jameson this week, or about Jefferson this week for sure. For sure. But thank you for the super chat there. I would definitely try to trade, see what you can get out of Jefferson. But the best scenario for you is definitely going to be to trade Lamb. And you've got enough reliable pieces there to work with that and get yourself a true RB1 there for sure. But hopefully you should be able to have Trey Benson back this week, hopefully there. Another super chat here from NN4MZ. What's up? Am I ready for war? Let's get you ready for war. Let's do this. 12 team, 3 wide receiver, 1 flex, full PPR. Quarterback is Josh Allen. Oh, we love Josh this week. Well, we love Josh every week, especially last week. My goodness. Josh Allen. Jamar Chase. I'm very frustrated with Jamar Chase. I have a team, and it's not, and I'm going to make the playoffs, so it's not a threat, but he could be potentially putting my bye week at risk here with this absence. So I've got a bone to pick with Jamar Chase right here. But you've got Jamar Chase, Emeka Ibuka, Jaden Higgins, Kayshon Boutte, Luther Burden, Trey McBride at tight end, running backs, Javonte, Travion Henderson, Woody Marks, Benson, Tootin, Monangai, Brian Robinson, Algier. And you got to drop one. You're stacked there at do you have to drop one, or can you try and trade one off there? Maybe try and trade Benson off there. You're absolutely stacked at running back. I'm of the opinion that while the return of Ramondre Stevenson, when it does happen, can take away some goal line opportunities for Travion Henderson, I am of the opinion that he will still get enough work to, at the very least, be a high-end RB2 there. So with Javonte Henderson and Woody Marks really securing that job there, and, you've got 3 solid top 24 on a weekly basis there. So trading away Benson might be the best bet there. And obviously you've gotten, stacked up with the best handcuffs there. So if you have to drop one, if you have to drop one, I would try and hold on to those running backs and drop Burden, perhaps. It is 3 wide receivers, so it's tough for you to do that. But there are good receiving options on waivers if you've got to drop someone and pick up a receiver there. But potentially see if you can hand one of those running backs off to somebody. Otherwise, I might have to go ahead and drop Luther Burden on that one, because those are all such good handcuffs. I hate to drop any one of them. If I had to pick a handcuff to drop, I would say it would have to be, I would have to go with Brian Robinson. I was faced with the choice of, do I drop Brian Robinson in a league? And I had to on that one in terms of I love him as a handcuff, right? Because obviously, if Christian McCaffrey went down, we know he would have top 12 upside there. But the standalone value there isn't up there with a Bashal Tootin, Kamanungai, and Tyler Algier. So that's the only issue there, in my opinion. But if I had to pick one, it would be that. Then from Shorty, 8-3, looking forward to the playoff week, or looking towards the playoff weeks. PPR, wide receivers are JSN, Chase, Tet, Kayshawn Booty, Burden, Reed, and tight ends are Tyler Warren, but possibly trade of Tet/Warren for McBride/QJ. Or do I just hold and let it ride? That one is tough because this is a good sell high point for Tet, right? And the transition from Warren to McBride is awesome because we have Jacoby Brissett locked in essentially for the rest of our fantasy season, right? As long as Arizona sticks to their timeline. And I do think they will in terms of that Kyler Murray injury. We were given 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, that locks it up for us, right? So with that said, I mean, McBride is performing at a level that has just dwarfed Warren is fantastic, but McBride is just performing at such an incredible level. I think I would make that trade. I don't feel confident starting QJ. That's the only issue there is that you are going to be, hoping that Jaden Reed comes back here in a second to really give you that solidified wide receiver 3. But the upgrade to Trey McBride would be fantastic. So I kind of like that trade. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to Tet, I mean, he's moved up significantly in rankings. And my hope with Tet McMillan or T-Mac, my bad. He doesn't like to be called Tet. My hope with Tetero McMillan is that the Panthers know that they have been trying to lean aggressively on the run, and they've been restricting volume for Bryce Young there, right? And so when I look at that, for me, when I look at like the restriction of volume for Bryce Young compared to the lack of volume for a Justin Fields lack of volume is on him, right? And his inability to be effective from the pass. Bryce Young's lack of volume is less about an inability to be effective and more about the fact that they just straight up were not letting him throw a significant amount of passes. But 2 times this season, and actually let me bring up the stats so I've got them exactly for you guys. And why I'm just, slightly hesitant. I like the trade. I'm just slightly hesitant on the Tet portion of it just because, where are you at, Bryce Young? Just because I feel like we might be on the cusp of them letting Bryce Young push a little bit more volume, especially with the upcoming matchups here. So we have seen 2 times where they have let Bryce Young go over 40 attempts this season. Jesus, I can't see. I'm getting old. That was Arizona, where he threw the ball 55 times, but had 3 touchdowns and over 300 yards, right? Very successful day, top 10 day at quarterback for him, over 20 fantasy points. And then this matchup here where he completed 31 of 45 attempts for 448 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, interceptions are okay. He hasn't been massively sloppy other than the first game of the season here. I feel like he can handle more volume, and they don't need to keep him in that 20 to 25 range. They've been very fond of trying to keep him in that 25 range there. And I really, really think that this performance right here could be what we were looking for to get the Panthers coaching staff to finally say, okay, let's push the volume up a tiny bit. My man should be over 30 attempts, 30, 35 attempts on a weekly basis here. We don't have to lean so aggressively on the run. So that's my only hesitation, is that if we do get more pass attempts from Bryce Young, we would in fact finally see him be able to give consistent high volume to McMillan. But that's a hunch, right? That's not a guarantee there for you. So making this trade right now at a high point when he could very well go back down to giving us those, that floor of 10 fantasy points on a week-to-week basis, right? I don't think it's a bad move, especially when McBride is producing at the level he is, and I don't think it's going to change. When you look at Jacoby Brissett, I mean, we've talked about it a ton, guys. If you've watched the videos, we've talked about Jacoby and Michael Wilson ad nauseum over the past couple of weeks here. And Marvin, even going back further, Marvin Harrison Jr. with Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby at this point is such a lock for volume rest of season. When you look at the matchups ahead for him, it's a combination of matchups that are either pass friendly or very pass encouraging. Like this week against Jacksonville is incredibly pass friendly. It did not show last week against the LA Chargers because the Chargers, which we talked about, right? We talked about my concerns about Justin Herbert, the offensive line, like just watch out and be very careful of that. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened there. Their offensive line is cooked, and anyone with, an above average edge rusher is going to pull right through on him, unfortunately. So issues ahead for the Chargers with that offensive line. Maybe they retool over the bye week and try and get things together. But Jacksonville at the end of the day is a very pass friendly matchup. Outside of that and like one other performance, they have been generous on another level here. So, and then we've got Tampa Bay, which is not necessarily pass friendly, but is pass encouraging in terms of Baker Mayfield, pushing these games to typically be higher volume matchups there. LA Rams, again, one that leans towards more garbage points there. So Houston is the only real issue matchup they have in week 15. And after that, Atlanta and Cincinnati lay up matchups there. So all of those games, with the exception of Houston, are games where we will see aggressive volume from Jacoby Brissett. And maybe once we get CJ Stroud back, that matchup against Houston will at least maybe encourage a little bit more pass volume and back and forth there. But for the most part, Trey McBride is locked in on a level that only Brock Bowers can achieve along with him, unfortunately, there. So it gives you such a positional advantage. At this point, I'm sad at the lack of Trey McBride that I have. So to upgrade to him is massive there. So I'm okay with it on that one. But again, I just wanted to express my, concerns about Tet and the potential for his volume moving forward there. From Lee Steigert, thank you for the super chat. Drop one in 10-team PPR. Kayshon Boutte, Jacoby Myers are worthy. That one's oddly easier for me than you would think. It is Xavier Worthy. Oh yeah, he's at drop level, unfortunately there. He is moved well outside my top 24. It ain't even close. At this point, we know that Rashee Rice is the clear wide receiver one of this offense. Worthy is producing at an abysmal level, and we can potentially excuse it maybe a little bit because we know that he is playing through a shoulder injury. It's not talked about a lot, but we do know that obviously that is going to have some level of effect there. He's also been dealing with this ankle injury as well. The shoulder injury is never on the report, but it's something that, obviously they decided, no surgery or anything. It's something that he could play through. So I think it's kind of lingering there. But at this point, when you look at his production, which was not really impressive even when Rashee Rice was out, and that's the main concern, was that outside of one game, his first game back from the injury against Baltimore, which at that time, Baltimore was incredibly pass friendly, he had 15 fantasy points. And that was literally just the advantage of having a couple of really good rushes on the ground. From a receiving perspective, he only had 5 receptions for 83 yards there. That was his best performance of the season. Outside of that, he's had 10 or below fantasy points in every single games this season. It's just underwhelming at this point. There's no volume. The touchdown opportunities aren't there. And I don't see where it turns around, because we've seen this, there's a wide variety of matchups. It's not as if, these have been like last week against Denver. You can excuse it and say, well, that's Denver. That would be a very difficult matchup for Worthy, right? But unfortunately, it's coming in matchups that should have been better performances there, where he has just been incredibly underwhelming. You give us 8 fantasy points against Washington, 6 fantasy points against Vegas. We just saw the way that Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and George Pickens picked apart that secondary, and you gave us 6 fantasy points. It's just, it's not his year, unfortunately. So Worthy is the one I would drop. Kayshon Boutte, when he returns, has touchdown equity. The rapport that he has with Drake May is just so good. I think he'll, step right back into where he was. Not a ton of volume, but somebody who Drake May is looking at when he gets into the red zone. And then Jacoby Myers, I like. As I'm actually going to talk about, I'm going to put out a video tomorrow that does talk about him. I don't like him in this matchup. He is a avoid for me this week, purely based on the matchup here. But long term in this offense, I think he fits a role that they want to have consistently there, right? Um, at this point, Parker Washington is playing is playing more in the slot compared to the other receivers there. Ideally, they want to have Jacoby Myers and Brian Thomas Jr. on the outside, and obviously Brian Thomas Jr. has had his struggles there. But Jacoby Myers is someone who I think that they will try to intentionally push to another level of, reliability in their and consistency in their offense. So long term, I want to see where this heads with Jacoby Myers. Thank you for the super chat, by the way, Lee. From Arav, super chat. Goddard, Goddard, Michael Wilson, Jalen Warren, questionable flex. And then you have Monangai and Charbonnet. We're definitely going with Michael Wilson. Although this does low key, just FYI, this does feel like, and this is not analysis thing. You know how there are just Dallas Goedert weeks. Two guys that Dallas Goedert and Sam Laporta are guys that you can just kind of look at and get a vibe and say it's a Sam Laporta week. It's a Dallas Goedert week. Now matchups do play into it, but I do think this is a Dallas Goedert week. But if it's not, the production has been a little underwhelming there, obviously, for the pass catchers in Philadelphia. Michael Wilson, again, won't drag it out there. We talked about Jacoby Brissett and the upside that he has. Love this matchup here. So Michael Wilson is the direction that I would go for sure. Jalen Warren would obviously make it a little bit more questionable if he does end up playing. Right now, I am ranking him as if he is playing, just because it seemed like he was, like, if you compare him to a Josh Jacobs, obviously Josh Jacobs leans more on the seems like he's more at risk this week compared to Jalen Warren, who's the wording around him has been like, it's possible that he might be able to pull it out there. But if he is, perhaps I could see a scenario where perhaps they play him through the injury and maybe reduce his snaps a little bit, because obviously they have Kenneth Gainwell who can, play alongside and tandem very well there. So makes him a little bit riskier unless we get the full clear. He's good to go by Friday, right? So, but Wilson is just a high upside play. From Belinda Davis, thank you for the super chat. Oh, thank you so much for the lovely compliment there as well. What defense would you use rest of season? Ooh, this is a good one there. Patriots, Houston, or Buccaneers? And then half PPR also, would you play Kayshon Boutte or Alec Pierce? I fear if Kayshon Boutte does play this week, I fear him playing off of a hamstring injury. That always makes me a little bit uncomfortable. So I will lean Alec Pierce on that one, even though I don't love the matchup for Alec Pierce. But the good thing is that Daniel Jones is not afraid to chuck it into difficult coverage to Alec Pierce there. We saw him with a beautiful catch last time they played in double coverage. And Daniel Jones has no fear in doing that. And Alec Pierce has proven that he is incredibly reliable. So the bad matchup doesn't dissuade me. And also, reasonably, we can also say that, bad matchup, technically, Alec Pierce is not the wide receiver one, right? So bad matchup can technically lean more towards a bad situation for Michael Pittman, which might lean towards more targets for Alec Pierce. So I'm willing to risk it with Pittman or with Pierce in this matchup. I will be risking it with Pittman, FYI. I will be starting him, even though it is a bad matchup. Because I can't afford to sit Michael Pittman this week. But Alec Pierce, yeah. So when we're looking at defenses rest of season here, Patriots defense, Houston defense, or Buccaneers defense. Instinct is to go with Houston's defense because they have been so incredibly stout, right? Patriots defense, though, generally speaking, rest of season schedule, only issue is that the Patriots still have a bye week, right? Bucks have had their bye week. Has Houston had their bye? I believe Houston's had their bye week, but let me double check there. Yeah, Houston had their bye week as well. So Patriots has the best matchups, but the only issue is they're the only team with the bye week still remaining in week 14 there. But they got Cincinnati this week, the Giants bye week, followed by Buffalo, Baltimore, and the Jets. That's a little bit rough there in terms of two of those being not ideal matchups, right, in the fantasy playoffs there. When we look at Houston, though, This stretch here is not ideal. Obviously, we have Buffalo, although for that matter, Houston is still very much so in play because of the amount of turnovers that they do generate there. They're such a solid defense that I would say Houston and even a defense like Kansas City, Denver, and whatnot, they're defenses that you can play through even bad matchups. Like Denver, hey, you're playing Kansas City, it's okay. We'll still roll you out because you're Denver and you can still pull through on that. So Houston, over the next couple of weeks, not the most ideal. They have Buffalo, Indianapolis, and Kansas City. But once you get into the playoffs, you get Arizona, which we love Jacoby Brissett. But then again, he will give us volume and he will give us interceptions and pick sixes, and we like that. Vegas, that's probably one of the better matchups that you can ask for in the playoffs. And then the LA Chargers, again, who we love Justin Herbert, but I talked about the fact that when we're looking at that pass rush, obviously it's a major issue there. Their offensive line not being able to handle it. So I kind of lean towards Houston as the one. Bucks, I don't have, let's see. Bucks, I don't have a major problem with. I mean, they've got a really good rest of season schedule there. After this, they've got Arizona, New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, Miami. But good matchups don't necessarily always mean the best fantasy points for them. They played Atlanta earlier in the season. Now, granted, different quarterback situation, but they played Atlanta earlier in the season. Played them well, but only produced 2 fantasy points. That's my only issue there. So I lean towards Houston is the one that I would go with there. Thank you for the super chat, Belinda. From Nicholas, we're getting lots of super chats there, guys. Thank you so much. From Nicholas, what's up? Oh, thank you. Nicholas said, for the podcast people that can't see it, Nicholas said, big fan. You're the most consistently accurate creator on this platform. Thank you. I really appreciate that. You need a win this week. You're considering trading away Amon-Ra, Tyrone Tracy for Amon-Ra and Tyrone Tracy for Saquon and Kenneth Walker. I'm not mad at that. I'm okay with that. I think that Amon-Ra and Saquon is a very fair trade there. Obviously, Amon-Ra is fantastic, but we are having consistent, strong production there from Jameson Williams. And obviously, you got to compete with Jahmyr Gibbs on the ground as well. So he's consistent, but I wouldn't put him on that same, like I have Amon-Ra separate from our JSN, our Puka, and our Jamar Chase, right? So yeah, that's a fair trade in my opinion. And then Tracy, I'm very pro trade high on sell high on Tyrone Tracy here. And a shift to Kenneth Walker is, I don't hate it. It does require us trusting Mike McDonald and what he was saying regarding, I just realized that I wrote an article